Back to the book. So the gooks were not the only danger. We were killing ourselves and breaking our legs and falling sick and cracking up and being carried away. It was how it was in a mountain war in deep winter. But the gooks were to have their chances. Both Mac, Allen, and I had lost men, and now it came Simonis' turn. So Simonis is the guy that I'd said had done a big operation that was pretty successful, hadn't taken any casualties, and had killed a bunch of enemy. And now we're about to do an encounter with him. Some things are going sideways for him. Back to the book. I heard the firing before I was really awake. Part reality, part nightmare. I sat up suddenly in the bag. Princeton was up and dressed, and he handed me a canteen cup, hot with coffee, very strong and black the way he made it. Prince went on fussing with domestic chores, keeping a tidy bunker. Mr. Simonis is catching it, he said. Simonis had taken a patrol down the mountain the night before, an ambitious affair all the way into the valley. He should have been back into the line by this time. It was almost 6. I tried to call the CP, but nobody answered. They must all be out trying to do something about Simonis. Then I remembered that Chaffee wasn't there. He'd torn his hand, helping men lay barbed wire. It had become infected, and he was down at the battalion getting it repaired. Chaffee had no business out there muscling wire, but tried telling Chaffee not to do things. So there's Chaffee's not around. The squared away company commander's not around. So it's actually Phillips that's running the company right now. And you got Simonis supposed to be back in the wire, but he's not. He's stuck out in the field. And Simonis had radio contact, and he'd been caught out there at first light as they went across a little stream, and they got mortared. They got hit. And so finally Brady goes and gets to Phillips and talks to him. Phillips was back to the book. Phillips was standing in front of the CP looking solemn. Look, Red, I'll take some people down there if you want with stretchers and help Simonis get out of there. Phillips looked at me for the first time in what seemed to be focus. Yeah, he said, that's a good idea. I sent a fire team down already with a corpsman and some blood, but they're going to need more than that. Good idea. Get a squad of people together. I appreciate this. Get them back. I appreciate it. It came to me, he was afraid maybe they wouldn't be back. And so Brady gathers up his troops, and they take off. He says he's feeling afraid, but he's going anyways. And they take off down the hill, and it's a long distance, but they make it up very quickly because they're traveling light and they're heading downhill, which is pretty easy. No, it's obviously easier than going uphill. Back to the book. I was at the bottom before I expected. A dozen or more Marines lay around in the snow, some under some pines at the edge of flat ground. There were 2 dead, Simonis told me, and 7 wounded out of 12. Only one of the wounded was really bad, and he might not make it. The others were walking wounded. It was the mortars that caught them in the open ground at first light. They must have had the concentration registered, he said, because there were no ranging shots, just silence one moment and shells whirring the next. There was no firing at all from either side. So one thing about mortars is first of all, they're hard to shoot accurately. And when he's talking about ranging, what you do is you shoot one. If you're trying to hit a target, you shoot the first one long, and then you shoot the second one short, and then you take the compromise the 2 in the middle, and then you're going to hit your target. Mm-hmm. So that's how mortars work. So what they have in this situation, when he said that they must have had the mortars registered, that means they already have them. They know that spot, and they don't have to range them at all. They can just drop them. And the other thing so mortars, you don't always hear that sound of them being launched, especially if it's further away. You're not going to hear that. Or different atmospheric noise conditions. Mm-hmm. You know, if you got heavy cloud cover, that reflects the noises. But if you don't, maybe you don't hear it. Maybe different terrain doesn't let you hear noises, just like noises reflecting around in a city. Mm-hmm. And the other thing about mortars that is hard to understand, mortars come in all different shapes and sizes. And small mortars are tiny. They're tiny little 60 millimeter mortars. They're tiny. Mm. And I mean, it's 6 centimeters, right? That's how big it is. They're tiny little things. And then it goes all the way up to 120 millimeter. And they go bigger than that. But common is, as big as 120 millimeters. But,
and that's the diameter, right?
Yeah. Yep. It's big.
Yeah.
And so what you end up with, the main point of this is that these things, when mortars hit, the shards, the shrapnel that comes off them, people think of shrapnel as being little tiny things, and I've talked about this before. Shrapnel is big. Shrapnel is giant. Shrapnel can be 8 to 10 inches long. I mean, just giant, and they're thick. Shrapnel is a half-inch piece of steel, just a big chunk, a half-inch piece of steel. It's brutal. And so when it hits in these guys, totally unexpected, they're just walking, and boom, it's devastating. But the shooting had stopped. Back to the book. They had stretchers out and rolled the bodies aboard, strapping them on with their own belts. And then 4 men lifted Caulfield and slid a stretcher under him. So Caulfield is a big, giant guy. They said he's over 6'6", just a monster of a guy. God knows what he weighs, but he's huge. And so they got to carry him. And like I mentioned, that they were running downhill to get to him. Well, now to get back, they got to go uphill the whole way.
Yep.
We heaved him up and started off up the trodden snow slowly, as it had to be with his weight on the hill. The hill reached endlessly upward. So they are trudging, and it doesn't take long for them to be like exhausted. Back to the book. The other 3 men looked as bad as I felt. We were all tired, the 4 of us, and among us there wasn't a damn shred of sympathy anymore for Caulfield, the cause of our exhaustion, of our misery. We all hated poor Caulfield. When I realized this, some pride seeped back into me. We were all in the same fix. I didn't want to be the first to give up. But if I didn't give up soon, I would die there with Caulfield, there in the snow, broken by the impossible load we carried. I was climbing now with my eyes shut, not wanting to see how much hill remained, my mouth wide open and gasping. We all fell again, the 3rd time, like Christ under the cross. This time I didn't get to my feet, but crouched there, gulping air. Around me, the others were still down. Then Simonis was at my side. Time to change over. We'll take him for a stretch. So this is just a brutal physical evolution that's happening. Back to the book. I was thirsty, but my canteen was frozen solid. Princeton was always warning me about that, but I hadn't wanted to add whiskey the way Prince did. I regretted it now and scooped up smooth snow from just off the trail and let it melt in my mouth. So imagine that. You're just devastatingly thirsty, and boom, you go to get your drink at your canteen. It's frozen completely solid. Brutal. Now they continue. I mean, it's just a heinous evolution that they go through. They finally get him back up. Back to the book. The climb was over 13 hours after it began. Over for today. Tomorrow could be the same or worse. It really wasn't fair that having done so much, there was still so much to do. You never really mastered war, never got on top of it. It was always too big. There was too much to it ever to finish the job.